All right, let's chat a little bit about Racing's roster and go through this by position. Goalkeepers, they started off their preseason roster with Hillary Beale, Jordan Bloomer, Kelsey Daughtry, Katie Lund, Olivia Sekini. That's five, count them five for the preseason. Defenders, Abby Urseg, Rebecca Holloway, Julia Lester, Brianna Martinez, Paige Monahan, Satara Murray, Carson Pickett, and Ellie Pikajusama, excuse me if I'm mispronouncing that, and Zanetta Wine in this one as well. For midfielders, there's 7 total. Ari Borges is rounding out the midfielders here. Alex Chidiak, Savannah DeMello, Jalen Howell, Taylor Malham, Lauren Malay, Wang Shuang, rounding out the midfielder core here. 7 total and 9 total forwards on Racing Louisville's roster. Kristen Davis, Jaden Edwards, Amina Ekic, Kayla Fisher, Parker Goings, Thembi Katlana, Jessica McDonald, Nadia Nadim, Riley Parker listed initially, but now we know part of the movement was to send her to Tigres Femenil, and Uchenna Canu is now listed among the forward core in Racing Louisville. So when we're looking maybe position by position here, obviously there have been a round of cuts as preseason has gone on. Some of these players are actually no longer featured on the preseason roster. But to start, it looked at the time that there was, a lot of draft picks at the moment, combined with some of the internationals that Racing Louisville has really acquired over these kind of maybe last 18 months with Kim Björkegren at the helm. This is a team that you could look at and point and say is kind of full of internationals at this moment, in every position, really. But when I'm looking at all of these forwards at the moment, I'm curious as to who's going to get the start and what that's going to look like in Bjorkegren's lineups.
Yeah.
Because I think that's the biggest thing for me. I think what is this coaching staff going to present to this team that is maybe a little bit different, or that could perhaps take them over that next hurdle in 2023. And I'm really excited for the inclusion of Bev Yanez on this
Yeah.
coaching staff. I'm curious if maybe this is a little bit of an X factor for Racing Louisville. We're talking about a former player turned coach, now working with Racing Louisville, a team that is coming off of consecutive bottom half of the table finishes. How do you turn that around? Right? How do you get that response out of players and to sort of get that buy-in to what the head coach is trying to present tactically, And there's also players on here that are navigating injuries as well that might not, be part of that equation in the first half
Right.
of the season, let's say.
Yeah, which I think is really hard. That's a really hard thing to do, is turn around a team's mentality, um, to get them over this hump that they have been sliding down for the last 2 years, right? They've really, really struggled to pick up a lot of consistent momentum to run forward with what you have in front of you and what this league offers. So yes, getting Yanez as part of the coaching staff is going to provide more in light on the situation in terms of the coaching staff, right? New ideas, a new perspective, a new way to talk to these players, to kind of get them bought into what you want to do. I also think it's interesting that Kim Bjorkegren does acquire so many internationals on his roster. I think there are pros and cons to that in terms of what they bring to your team, because pros being they come from other leagues, and this is an opportunity. They've also experienced success in other leagues and with other teams, so they can bring that experience and reference that while they're playing for Racing Louisville in the NWSL. However, the NWSL is a league and unlike any others in the world. It is so talked about how competitive it is, how close top to bottom teams are compared to other leagues, how physical it is, how fast and transitional. And sometimes that can hurt players that aren't used to that and aren't ready for that type of speed. Players either fall right into stride, and we've seen that throughout the league. I think Wang Shuang was one of those players that came in last year for Racing Louisville and stepped right up to the plate and was able to fit in seamlessly to this team and this roster. But when you have so many different parts, how do they make sure they do that going into this year? Luckily, though, there's not too many young players, right, on this roster. Although there's a lot of new ones, it's not
Yeah.
we've got so many rookies.
No, I think maybe that's a little bit of a silver lining in this one, that the players that they are running with in 2023 have at least a year of professional experience, behind them.
Mhm.
Um, but those are still young players. I think that are continuing their development, right, in the professional league. And that was maybe one of the bright spots that came out of Racing Louisville last year. They did have a pretty strong draft in 2022, and Savannah DeMello was rated highly, as was Jalen Howell. There was a lot of debate about who would go number one, and Jalen Howell was included amongst the names of those prospects as a possibility to go to San Diego with the number one pick.
Mhm.
We now know that DeMello and Howell ended up with Racing, and it's just sort of interesting maybe to note that these are two players who are going to enter their sophomore year, right, as professionals in this league. And with that, maybe they're still the young prospects that we keep an eye on moving into this 2023 season, because we saw DeMello kind of separate herself from the young prospects in Racing during 2022 with her play on the field. We saw her as at times sort of navigate and roam on the field as sort of this linking type of player, kind of more
Mhm.
methodical and passing and trying to combine with teammates. And we also saw her kind of evolve a little bit or introduce herself as sort of a set piece specialist. I mean, my goodness, it just sort of felt like, we had multiple highlights of free kick goals
Yeah.
for this player. So, I mean, I think these are still the two players to keep an eye on for Racing in 2023, as well as the young prospects.
Yeah, I want Savannah DeMello to build on what she gave last year in the league and with this team. I think set pieces, yes, that's great. If she can make that her bread and butter, do it. But what else can we get from Savannah DeMello? And I'm asking that of her as a sophomore in this league in her second year. Last year, we were just happy with her scoring all these set pieces as a rookie. And I think to herself, she needs to be asking those questions. What can I do more of? How can I take on more leadership roles? And that's what I want to see from DeMello this year. As for a player like Jalen Howell, I was a little underwhelmed with what we got from Jalen Howell last year, just with how much pressure was put on this player and this name leading into the 2022 season as a top draft pick coming out of the draft in 2022. The experience that this player has winning national championships. And she came into a really tough Racing Louisville team that asked a lot of her. And I think she tried to do too much. I really did. I think that she tried to do too much. So for Jalen Howell, play simple this year, right? Like be just a consistent player day in and day out. Be what your team needs you to be. You don't have to be the hero. And I think that in combination with DeMello, Howell could be really good this year. Maybe a little less pressure than being a rookie. And I
Yeah.
think that could help a player like Howell because I want to see her reach her full potential. And I didn't think we got it last year in 2022 by any means.
I don't think that's a unfair analysis. I mean, I think they re-signed this player. This is a
Yeah.
player that this franchise wants to build with and wants to build around. I think that that's helpful. I think that she obviously performed well enough to enter those kind of negotiations with the franchise to say, hey, like let's make sure that we get you a new contract, and we want to keep you here in Louisville and build with that. So I'm eager. I'm with you. I'm eager to see not only the continuity of DeMello, but even more improvement for somebody like Howell, and
Mhm.
how those two specifically help run the midfield for this team moving forward. But they're still young players, right? So who is someone on this roster that we're looking for those young prospects to go ahead and still pull from in terms of that experience, veteran leadership. And we're looking at somebody like Lauren Millay in this section as well, because when we're going through these midfielders, we're talking about two players right now who are considered the young core of this team. And Lauren Millay, I think once upon a time might have had some of those expectations thrown upon her as well. Like, we're drafting you. You are, someone that we want to make sure that we grow and develop over time. And hopefully you could slot in and get these extended minutes. We saw her make the move from North Carolina to Racing Louisville. And she's really, during her time with Racing, has kind of emerged again as one of these stalwarts, these reliable players that you can see week to week in Racing Louisville starting 11s. And it's been cool to chat with her on A3, to talk about all things Racing Louisville and kind of hear how she's wanted to embrace that a little bit, that she's entering a certain phase of her career as someone who's no longer, could be considered maybe one of those young players of the league, kind of fully entering like the next step, like as a veteran presence on these rosters. And it was very, very cool to sort of see her run a play with Racing last year, and sort of how she was trying to combine with somebody like a former teammate and Jessica McDonald. And I think that this is a player that that Howell and DeMello will profit from
Right.
working with and running midfields.
I agree completely. I mean, this is Malay's 5th year in the league. She was drafted in 2019, played with North Carolina before being drafted in the expansion draft to Racing Louisville several years ago in 2021. And when we spoke to Malay, that interview was during a preseason preview of Racing Louisville last year. And one thing she really talked about was how she wanted to be more of a leader, and she wanted to take on that role and be someone that younger players could look to. And I think that was the first step and the first turning of a page for a player entering their 4th year last year to kind of say, wow, I don't feel like a veteran, but I have to try to take on that role and try to be that. And she was very vulnerable in saying that to us and saying that I'm being asked to take on a little bit more leadership than maybe I was not ready for, but just wasn't expecting, because she's always been one of the younger ones up until that point. And I think we saw glimpses of it last year, but now heading into this 5th year, Lauren Millay is that experienced veteran. She is. And I think she believes it. I think she's going to own it. And I think the players around her also believe that she is one of those experienced veterans that they can lean on, that they can look to, that they can ask questions to, and that Kim Björkegren can lean on a little bit. Because I think we might also see a player like Millay shift in and out of some different positions depending on what is needed of her. And that says a lot about the type of player Lauren Millay is, whether she's out wide. We could even see her be pulled in centrally a little bit more, higher up the pitch in midfield. She can really slot into a variety of different locations depending on the formation. And that's something you want from an experienced player, to show everyone else on the roster that this is what it takes to be a team player and to get the team win. I'm excited for Lauren Millay this year. I really am. This is one of the players in the league that excites me about how we could see a big jump in her growth.
No, I'm with you. I mean, these are the type of players, there has to be a certain level of trust, right? To sort of task a player with those type of different responsibilities, whether it's week to week or month to month. And she's definitely someone I think they're going to lean on a bit, in light of a World Cup year. We've been chatting a lot about players who may go missing for teams during long stretches of time in a World Cup year, because that is the moment where opportunity tends to present itself. And we saw it a little bit during the stretch of the Tokyo games as well. Players getting time on the pitch, and the international spotlight for Louisville shines in many different areas on the pitch, but there's a couple of players that this team may be without in light of the World Cup year. I mean, we've talked a lot on this preview about Uchenna Kanu, who might have World Cup responsibility with Nigeria, but depending on the final roster for China, we could possibly see somebody like a Wang Shuang on there as well. And though this is someone that we haven't maybe chatted a bit too much about on this preview, Thembi Katlana is someone that they were very excited to add to their roster last year, but unfortunately, through qualifiers, she ended up with a significant injury and was unable to get any time with the team during their run in 2022. But this is a player who has not only got experience in the international level, Katlana is returning to the NWSL after previous stints with Houston Dash, but might not be available for Louisville during certain stretches as she might have responsibility with South Africa in the World Cup. So it's not just one, not just two, but possibly three players, and who knows, maybe even more in the build up to the World Cup.
Right. I think one thing to note for those that haven't been aware, I didn't see this announcement. Another player that some might think is an international, Abby Erseg. She recently came to Racing Louisville. She is a former New Zealand international player, but she announced her retirement from the international game. So she will not be in attendance at the World Cup this summer, which takes her off this list as part of our international spotlight. And Sandra, you asked me earlier, the trade for Fox, Pickett, and Erseg.
Yeah.
How I think that one won out. Racing Louisville doesn't lose Emily Fox now during the World Cup. I think that's strategic on Kim Björkegren. I do. I think
I'm with you.
Yeah, I think it's a smart strategic move. It is.
I think it's one that's going to pay off because look, another player that we actually didn't highlight too much was Katie London, and she's a goalkeeper that came up massive for this team over the year. It's kind of one of those like double-edged sword type of compliments to your goalkeeper, where you're like, look at all of these saves that this goalkeeper has made, and the other side of that spectrum is that the defense in the midfield were letting through a lot of looks on goal. But another player that they re-signed, extended a contract. This will be their goalkeeper moving forward. But I'm with you. I think having some insurances right on defense is gonna make that job for Caitlin a little bit different than it was in 2022 than it will be in 2023. So I guess maybe that's what leads to the biggest burning question for this club, because really there's questions in each position as we're going through. Can all of these pieces, internationals, local talent, players that have been with the roster for a couple years now, can all of these pieces finally come together and make a playoff run?
That's the question.
It's burning.
That's the question. I mean, I think it's going to be really hard. I'm going to be honest. I think it's going to be really hard for Racing Louisville to come and put this all together. They have struggled the last 2 years to do that, to put together great games. They have these spurts and they have these moments throughout the season of greatness, right? Of going on a run. We saw that spewing from a player like Savannah DeMello. We did not talk nearly enough about Jess McDonald throughout this episode and what this type of veteran player can bring to this team as someone that is so driven, so focused, such a professional, and understands the game day in and day out. I think it's going to come down to the biggest names on this roster stepping up and playing bigger than themselves. That's a Savannah DeMello. That's a Carson Pickett. That's a Jess McDonald. That's a Lauren Millay. Being bigger than themselves. That's a Katie Lund in goal. They need a little bit of that chip on their shoulder this year to kind of almost, I don't want to compare two teams, but they almost need the energy that Kansas City had in 2022 this year. Chip on their shoulder. I can run and I can do this. And that's how they're going to do it. But yeah, I mean, can Racing Louisville make a playoff run? That is the burning question. I don't know.
I mean, I think it just leads to us making a projection. What's going to be the projected finish for this team in 2023. And listen, we talk all the time about the parity in this league and what it could look like. And I think it shows its head and rears its head even more in light of international cycles within it. And this is the World Cup year. There will be multiple players missing on every single team in this league in some capacity. What is Racing Louisville going to do with the season in front of them? What's our projected finish for them? You either go big or you go home. So maybe they shock the world and they close out in the middle three, or maybe they round out at the bottom three. I'm not gonna say that they're gonna shock the world. I think this is a team that will do better than last year, but I don't know if that's going to be in the playoffs. I believe, if memory serves me correct, this team finished in 9th place
Yeah.
in these standings in 2022, and I think they will improve and they will finish in 8th.
That's not what I was expecting you to say. That's amazing.
Hey.
I agree. I don't think it's going to be a turnaround year for Racing Louisville. I just think it's a little bit too much of an uphill climb. I think they've got the pieces together and they will continue to grow. Yeah, like a middle 4 finish, right? I don't think they're going to be in playoff contention. They could be one of the teams towards the final days of the regular season, pushing for a spot, but it's going to be a long shot. They're going to need a lot of pieces to fall into place. That's what I'm predicting for this Racing Louisville team. Maybe they'll play spoiler at the end of it all, and they'll have some influence because that's where they'll be in the table. But I just don't foresee them punching their ticket and really making a turn from the last 2 years into this year, just looking at the landscape of the league and the other top talent that is out there.
No, I'm with you, and I don't think that's unfair to say. I think maybe there's, like I said, that is technically an improvement.
Yeah.
That's technically an improvement
It is.
from the year prior, going from 9th to 8th. But I think there could be like wins within other areas. Like maybe they don't go to the playoffs, but maybe you get someone amongst all these forwards going on in a ridiculous run. Maybe Uchenna Canoe goes on a maddening score streak and gives you 7-8 goals and humors a golden boot.
I would love that.
Maybe they get some more set piece madness from Savannah DeMello. Maybe there's a lot of good individual things that come out of 2023 for this team, but I don't know if it is smashing their way through the playoff picture.
And maybe we talked about the international spotlight. The way that this is working out this year, the regular season for the NWSL is taking a bit of a pause, and the Challenge Cup is being played overlapping.
Maybe they win Challenge Cup.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Maybe Racing Louisville wins the Challenge Cup, but they just can't get it around for the regular season. We've seen it before. North Carolina Courage win the Challenge Cup in 2022 and then just flop during the regular season. Maybe that's it. You know what? I'm going with that one. Racing Louisville makes a run in the Challenge Cup, but they can't get it together for the regular season.
Maybe that's the formula. So did Houston. Houston had to win the Challenge Cup and agonizingly miss out on the playoffs before they finally broke through to the postseason just last year. So who knows? Maybe this is that story arc for Racing Louisville FC. We'll see. You know us. We love to come back here and talk about how incorrect we were. So stay tuned. We're going to have so much more to talk about because we are doing team by team previews for every single team in the build up to the regular season. Thank you all so much for listening to Attacking Third.